Hey you guys, it's Peter, and welcome to my channel, Peterisms, where I tell stories of my life and just little things that I have learned as I have grown into the person that I am today. And last fall, I had decided that I was going to do more videos about addiction and recovery. And I did them for a while, and then I kind of fell out of it. I was getting so many comments at that time from people that were saying, would you do a video about this, or would you do a video about that? But the problem was that many of the comments were very, very personal. And so I was a little worried that if I responded to a specific comment, that it would seem like I was directing it right to that comment. And which I did sometimes, because I thought that the suggestions that I were giving just based on my experience were things that maybe everybody could take something from, or, something that I had learned along the way that other people could learn too. But then it kind of stopped, and people stopped asking me questions and things like that. And so I was like, there's so much that I could talk about with recovery and addiction. So it's kind of like crazy that I can't come up with stuff on my own sometimes. It's kind of like when, I don't know how to if everything that you do when you're at home has to do with football, like you watch football, you watch, like college football, NFL, everything, and you have your favorite teams and all that kind of stuff, and you have your favorite, outfits that what are they called? Outfits, not uniforms. What's the word I'm looking for? Football jersey, and all of that, right? But then, if you were going to make a channel just about football, it's like you would do 5 videos, and then you'd be like, oh, I don't really know what other videos to do to talk about this, right? So I kind of need your help a little bit. If you have specific questions, please ask me in the comment section below, and I will try to make them into more universal videos that I think that everybody can learn from. But I was thinking about this the other day. One of the questions I get asked a lot by people in my personal life that are not in recovery and are not addicts or alcoholics is that they'll say what is your definition of an addict, or what is your definition of an alcoholic? And then they'll say how do you know, or how did you know that you were an alcoholic, or how did you know that you were an addict? And the thing is that it's an interesting question, and like I say before I go into any of these videos, anything that I share is just based on my personal experience. I am not a representative of any 12-step program, and I'm also, not an expert in this field. This is just based on my personal experience going through this. So I think it's kind of an interesting question, because when you look at the definition of addiction and, alcoholism and stuff like that, there's obviously the clinical definition from it, from a doctor's point of view and things like that. I'm not going to be talking about that today in this video. I'm going to be talking about more of a personal question that you can ask yourself. And there are tests that you can take online that are 10 questions, and it'll say am I an alcoholic? Am I an addict? And then it's I think it's you ask yourself 10 questions, and then if you answer 2 or more, you're probably an alcoholic or you're probably an addict. Anytime I've ever taken those tests, I'm just I'm off the charts. It's 9 or 10 yeses to all of the questions or something like that. And the questions aren't things that you would necessarily think, right? Some of them are. It'll be questions are things have you, tried to, I haven't looked at the tests in a long time, but a lot of them are put out by 12-step programs. But the questions will be things have you ever tried quitting on your own? Yes or no? And then been unable to? Yes or no? Have you ever tried quitting multiple times? Yes or no? But then the other questions are things due to your drinking, have you missed certain obligations like work or school and things like that? And other questions will be things looking at interpersonal relationships, has your drinking or your using affected interpersonal relationships and caused arguments, or, you not to have relationships with people in your life. And so that's another way to kind of maybe if you're questioning whether or not you have a substance abuse or chemical dependency issue and you're an addict or an alcoholic, to kind of look at that, right? I think for me, it's interesting because we talk about the first step of 12-step programs. And for me, I knew long before I ever came in to a 12-step program that I was an alcoholic and an addict. Like, I knew because first of all, I had gone through multiple treatments, and I had tried quitting in treatment programs and on my own multiple times, sincere efforts. Like, even if the effort was only for 3 or 4 days, I had sincere efforts of trying to quit that were, that there was no follow through. And in my head, I would make excuses up for why that was. But I think, like, I knew overall that I couldn't quit on my own. And in fact, I can remember being very scared towards the end because I couldn't imagine my life continuing to drink and use. And I've shared on here before, like, what my drug history was like at the very end, but it was bad. And, you know, my drinking was really the most severe out of all of it. I was drinking about 1.5 fifths of Jack Daniels a day. I was drinking, 2 to 3 40s a day. I was drinking a lot of beer. I would drink anything. I really would drink anything, but drinking was the worst of it, and it was really taking a toll on me physically. On top of that, I was using several other substances as well. And so, I was scared at the end. I don't know that I necessarily, because I was so out of it all the time, I don't know that I necessarily realized I was scared. Like, I hear a lot of people say in recovery, like, I was scared because I knew that I couldn't go on and I was afraid I was going to take my life. I never had that feeling. Like, that's a feeling that I never really connected to. But I didn't know how I was going to continue to live with using the way that I was living. Like, I knew that I had a very short period of time before something was going to happen. And I don't even know that I knew what that was going to be, whether that was going to be, that I was going to get arrested, or whether that I was going to die, or what was going to happen. I didn't, or be homeless, because those were my fears. So I didn't know what was going to happen, but I knew I couldn't continue to use. And nobody around me really had any clue the severity of my use. Like, none of my friends, they knew I used bad, but they didn't know, like, how bad it was, because I was hiding it even from them. And so, because they used a lot, but they didn't use as bad as I did. And then, so I had this fear of, what's my life going to look like if I continue to use? But the other side of that fear was, what's my life going to look like if I quit? Like, I couldn't imagine quitting. I couldn't imagine, like, going to treatment and getting sober. Like, that terrified me as well. This idea of, I couldn't imagine what my life would look like without using. And so I had all of this fear inside of me, right? And I think for me, over time, what I had to realize was that it was kind of like this scale. A lot of people talk about people get sober when they've had enough pain, which I really believe that that's true. I believe that people get sober and it sticks when they've had enough pain and they're tired of the pain. Or they'll say things like, there was no giggle left in the bottle. Well, there was a little bit of giggle left in the bottle for me. I mean, there were still some times that I was going out and I was having a good time and whatever. And part of it for me was, I think I was in so much misery inside, and I think that based on everything that was happening in my life, like, at that point, like, I had completely dropped out of school. I really didn't know what my future was going to be. I was terrified. I was living in fear. And so when I drank and I used, it kind of muted all of that and just took that all away. And so that, I think, equated a little bit to giggle in the bottle. But, I still went out, and I wouldn't say every time, but I still had some good times. And so for me, it wasn't like it was all pain and misery. But I do think that what has to happen is, and this honestly did not happen for me until I had been in treatment several days, which is why I am such a believer in, like, treatment programs and removing somebody, halfway houses, sober living houses, things like that, to remove somebody from the environment that they were using in. Although I will also say that I do believe if somebody really wants to get sober, they can get sober anywhere. I do believe that. But I think that it helps to remove the person, the addict or the alcoholic, personally I believe this, from the environment. Because for me, once I was, sober for 5 or 6 days, and I mean, like, dry sober in a treatment program, I wasn't working any kind of program yet, I kind of started having some clarity of mind. And what happened was, it was like the scale that I had, where if before the scale was, I was getting a lot of enjoyment off of drugging and drinking, and then over here was the pain associated with it, or the consequences and the pain, like that started like becoming heavier. And what I think has to happen is, for me, and this is how I define addiction today, is that, or if you're an alcoholic or an addict, that for me, I realized I was an alcoholic when I realized that the consequences were outweighing the fun, and when I wasn't enjoying it anymore, and it wasn't working for me anymore, And I say this a lot in meetings, and I say this a lot to my friends and things like that, that like, I'm an alcoholic. Well, I believe I'm an alcoholic because genetically I believe I'm an alcoholic and an addict. But I also believe I'm an alcoholic and an addict because I love to drink. Like, I loved to drink. I had a lot of fun for a long time drinking. If it still worked, and I wasn't getting into trouble, and I wasn't having consequences, and people didn't have the issues with me that I would probably still be drinking. If I could handle it and I could manage it, I wouldn't be sitting here, talking about what is an alcoholic, what is an addict. I would still be using. The reason I'm sitting here today and the reason that I got sober was because it wasn't working for me anymore. And because I was full of fear all the time, and I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And that was it. Like, I don't know how to explain it to you, because I just have like this vision of myself waking up in bed where ashtrays were turned over and there were cigarette butts mixed in with my legs and the blankets, and the whole apartment stank, and I'm lucky that the whole apartment didn't burn down the night before, and I go, out in the living room and alcohol's turned over and there's drugs everywhere, and it just was desperation. It just was literally living desperation. And I can remember, like how much it took me just to get like one foot in front of the other. I was tired. I was really tired, but that was all I knew at the end. That was the life that I knew. And like some of the situations I put myself in, which I've talked about over here, were very, very scary for me, So I can remember like when I first got sober, and people would ask me, there's something that we talk about, which is qualifying. And qualifying is where you say, okay, this is how I qualify as an alcoholic. This is how I qualify as an addict. Like, I believe I'm an alcoholic because. I believe I'm an addict because. And, and for me, it was that I was powerless over alcohol, and my life had become unmanageable as a result of that powerlessness, or that I was powerless over drugs and that my life had become unmanageable, was that as a result of my using, all of this other crap was happening around me. People were becoming upset with me. I wasn't able to attend classes. Those things that I talked about in that list of 10 questions that you ask yourself, I wasn't able to quit on my own. I wasn't able to show up to anything, let alone holidays, doctor's appointments, anything in between. I wasn't able to I couldn't even do laundry. I couldn't even do a load of laundry. Hell, I was sleeping in a bed with an ashtray that was turned over, and didn't care. And so I look at that, and so when people ask me when I got sober, like in those first couple weeks, they would say to me, have you had enough? And what they meant by that was, have you had enough pain? Are you done? And so I think for me, the question of, are you an addict or are you an alcoholic, is really rooted in, like, is the pain outweighing the fun at this point? Are the consequences and the pain and the misery outweighing the good times? And for me, I'm a believer that if they're not, you're probably not done yet. You're probably going to continue to go out there until you've had some pain and until you've had more pain and misery. And listen, and I've had friends of mine through the years, and it breaks my heart, that have had to continue to go back out there and convince themselves that they have not had enough pain and misery yet. That they go out there and they seek more pain and misery until they come back in. And some of them have come back in and come back in and come back in and come back in. And one of the reasons why I say I'm in recovery is because I don't know where my story ends. I hope I don't ever go back out there, but I could. And if I do, I hope that it's not to seek more misery, and I hope that I find my way back in, to the rooms of recovery. I hope that that's never my story. I hope I stay. And people ask me a lot. They're like, well, you've been sober for 28 years. Why do you still go to meetings? And the reason why I still go to meetings is because the people that I see that have what I want are people at 30, 40 plus years sober that are living lives, and they're happy, joyous, and free, and they continue to go to meetings. They continue to sponsor people and have sponsors. They continue to do service work. They continue to be active in 12-step programs. They have what I want. And so to have what they have, I have to do what they do. And that's why I do that. And you know, and I think that there's no greater power than one alcoholic talking to another or one addict talking to another. And you know, very early on when I got sober and somebody would look at me and say, have you had enough pain? And then they would share with me what their pain looked like. And my pain looked very similar to theirs, was when I was like, okay, they get me. And then I could trust them. And I didn't feel like it was somebody judging me or pointing their finger at me or saying, you're a bad person because of this, or, you know, you need this, this, and this, right? It was like somebody understood me and they had gone through the same pain that I was going through. And I didn't want to feel any more pain. And I was sick and tired, you know, of being sick and tired. And so if you're there and you relate to what I'm saying, chances are you may be an alcoholic or an addict too, you know? So anyway, I just wanted to do that video on here today because it's a question that I get asked a lot, and I thought it's maybe a starting point for me to do more addiction and recovery videos over here. So, and like I said, I'm not a, you know, representative of any 12-step program. I'm just sharing my personal experience, strength, and hope about this topic. And there's a lot of people that might have different opinions about that or different definitions. So seek those out as well. And I love you guys, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.